What if seeking isn't about finding answers, but growing into the silence they leave behind? At some point, the questions fall away, and what's left is the light we've been trying to name. This is Seekers and Finders. Today, I'm sitting down with my co-host Gary to explore his remarkable journey through the spiritual landscape, a path that's taken him from Gnosticism to Bhakti Yoga, from Tibetan Buddhism to non-Dual Shaiva Tantra and beyond. After more than 50 years of seeking, Gary came to a simple but powerful realization. You are your own guru now. That's where the real journey begins. So let's get started. So let's start where we usually start with our guests. How did you get involved in your spiritual search?
I was very depressed, and I think that's the best way to, and the best way to approach entering the spiritual path. And I've met a lot of people, and they have followed that similar pattern. Now, not everybody. Different people come to the spiritual path in different ways, but a lot of people I know, including me, came via being so totally depressed and suicidal and not wanting to live anymore, that this was like the spiritual path was like, grasping at straws. The drowning man grasping at any straw. So it was like grasping at a straw. So that's the way I came.
And what time in your life was this state of depression? Were you working? Were you in school? What
I was
happened?
out of school. I was out of school. I graduated from the University of Buffalo in 1966. I got a job in New York City, working for the U.S. Public Health Service. I was recruited at school in their syphilis eradication program. I was what they called the field epidemiologist, where I was working out of the Chelsea Health Center down on West 23rd Street, and we would go out to interview people who were named as contacts in known syphilis cases. We would interview them about their sexual contacts and draw their blood to test for syphilis. So I remember this was the summer after college, and it was hot and sweaty in New York, and the only suit I owned was a woolen suit. I was sweaty. I had acne. I got very depressed.
What year was this?
1966.
The year Mayor John Lindsay was the mayor of New York at the time, as I recall. They were developing Lincoln Center, building it up, and New York was really a cultural melting pot at the time. So, well, that job is kind of depressing to begin with.
Well, that's what added to the depression, because I met so many down and out people. I met some high end people. Syphilis doesn't choose sides in terms of socioeconomic levels, but I met so many down and out people and went to so many depressing apartments. And I would just come home at night. I was living in Staten Island at the time, so it was a commute every day. And I was just saying, like, man, life is bleak. Life is very, very bleak. And I was kind of depressed anyway, but this only like poured a whole nother level on top of my basic depression.
So let's give people a small window into this. When you went to someone's apartment, how did you approach the situation? What did you say to them?
I knocked on the door, and they said, "Who's that?" I said, "Hi, it's Gary, blah blah blah, from the U.S. Public Health Service, and I want to talk to you about something very important." So they let me in. Then I'd say, you know, you've been named as a contact uh, with someone who has syphilis, and we're here. We want to make sure that the disease doesn't spread. I'd like to draw your blood so we can test and make sure. And this way, if you do show up positive for syphilis, you can come down to the Chelsea Health Center, get some penicillin. Bingo, bingo. Works as opposed to like letting the disease fester in your system. And at a certain point, if you get into the later stages of syphilis, forget about it. So, and then I would say I'd like to talk to you about your sexual contact because that's the way the disease spreads. So that's the way we would do it.
And you personally drew the blood from the people? You were taught how to do that?
Yes.
You came with the syringe and the vials and everything, and you did it.
The vials, the vials with and then you tie up the arm and you pop the vein a little bit, and then you have this tube with the needle at the end. You put the needle in. The needles were pretty big too. In those days, they were pretty big. And then, when the blood shoots into the vial, then you crack the seal, and then it fills up the vial.
So, I mean, I guess you came up against some adverse people that were not interested in talking to you at all, either because they were embarrassed or they were just kind of angry.
Here's the funny thing. So when I was training, I was kind of naive, from Staten Island, kind of naive. Went to college, came back. Now I'm in the big city, right, for the first time. And they would say when you interview these people, especially these men. Well, yeah, well, no, it was men and women, but especially men. Said, always get the homosexual contacts. And I'm saying like, well, oh yeah, but they're married, and that was the big hoot. They would laugh and they'd like, married, schmarried, kids, no kids. Find the homosexual contacts because they're always there, and they always were. They always were there. So that was kind of a hoot because I was naive saying, well, they're married. What are you talking about? So, but there was always a homosexual thing, and it was a lot of homosexual, like the AIDS thing. It was like basically not only confined to gay people, homosexuals, but the syphilis thing too. It was across the board, but there were a lot of married guys who had gay contacts, and the gay contacts had the syphilis.
And it was just primarily syphilis. You didn't deal with gonorrhea or any other.
Gonorrhea was out of control. So they said, we can't do anything about gonorrhea. It's out of control. All we can do is try to get a handle on syphilis. And the U.S. Public Health Service had what they call the syphilis eradication program. I don't know what happened to it. I hear syphilis is on the rise again, but I mean, I don't really know. But in 1960s, the goal was to wipe out syphilis. Gonorrhea, they said, forget about it. There's no solution to that problem. Gonorrhea was rampant.
Okay, so can you remember now at what point, how many years in, or months, or days, when you started feeling depressed about this job?
It didn't take long. I would say probably 2 months, 2 months into the job, because I had a training program that was fine. I used to love training programs. I had so many jobs that I got in my life, and they all had training programs. I love the training programs. But then when you went out in the field, actually had to do the job, it became depressing. Not only the syphilis thing, but a lot of other jobs later on. So it took so maybe let's say the training program was a few weeks, a month, I don't remember. But then once I got into the field, I got depressed relatively quickly.
So did you stay with the job for quite a while, and then at some point, when did you think about knocking yourself off?
1 year. I stayed with the job 1 year, and that was pretty much my pattern in those days. I would get a job for about a year, and then I would quit around June or something because I wanted to spend the summers at the Jersey Shore. And then knowing because I was a college graduate in those days, college, unlike today, unlike today, in those days, if you were a college graduate, you get the Sunday Times, and there are just reams and reams and reams of jobs. Call grad, call grad. So I could always get a job for college graduates, And then, you go into the training program. That's always fun. Then you go out and do the job. It's not fun. And then, like, I would quit around June and go to Jersey Shore for the year. So I spent about a year in this job.
And did you find another job after that?
I found a job, as I said, jobs were easy in those days to find. If you were a college graduate, you didn't have to worry about finding a job. They were begging for people. So it was a different economic situation in those days. So I never worried about getting a job. I could always get a job.
But
That
this
was
was before you started the spiritual on the spiritual path.
So I found the spiritual path in like 1968, 69. This was 66. So I spent about 2 years, you know, in this pattern of going to work and coming home and going to the bar. So I spent about 2 years of doing that. And I think in 1968 or 69, I discovered I had my first foray into the spiritual path, the spiritual journey.
And what was that?
It was Gnosticism. I was looking at I was looking at the Village Voice ads one day, and I saw this little box ad for people who are interested in studying Gnosticism with this guy whose name was Francois, lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I said, "Hey, maybe that's something for me. I need something. I needed something, not mundane and every day. I needed some kind of a way out, a solution. Most people, I think, come to the spiritual path because they're looking for a way out. They're looking for a magic cure, a silver bullet. So this said Gnosticism. So I said, hey, that sounds pretty cool. So I called this guy, made arrangements to go meet him, and joined his group.
Okay, so what did you get out of the Gnosticism group?
Well, I got a whole lot out of the Gnosticism group because that opened my eyes to the whole spiritual thing, which, except for a few other quasi-spiritual books or related books, I really had no inkling as to what the whole spiritual thing was about. And I got to meet Joseph Campbell and got to read Joseph Campbell book Hero with a Thousand Faces, which totally changed my life. Bingo. I read that book, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. Boom. I knew my life would never, ever be the same again. That was my entree. Then I know I was in. I was in this new life.
Did you meet Joseph Campbell through the group or
Yeah.
under other circumstances?
No, through the group. This guy, Francois, who was a self-styled guru himself, self-styled guru, taught this Gnosticism, raved about Joseph Campbell and how Joseph Campbell saved his life and how Joseph Campbell was his daddy. And so he had Joseph Campbell come a few times to his apartment to just kind of check out to see what he was doing with this group. So we met Joseph Campbell there a few times. Then we went down to see Joseph Campbell at the Cooper Union when Joseph Campbell was giving a series of talks on mythology or whatever, and we went out with him after to McSorley's Ale House, famous ale house on East 7th Street, and where Joseph Campbell regaled us with fantastic stories about his time in India, in Japan, his thing he had going on with Indira Gandhi. I mean, it was a whole lot of stuff going on, and Joseph Campbell was. Robert Thurman was the only one who could rival, in my estimation, who can rival Joseph Campbell when it comes to storytelling. And I still think Joseph Campbell comes out on top. He's a master storyteller, and he's just completely entertaining. And he's got that Irish thing, so he knows how to tell a tale. He was totally riveting. He was one of the most impressive people I have ever met in my entire life.
Yes, I found him very interesting as well, his mythologies. But this was, you met him before he did the series with Bill Moyers, though. I think Bill
Right.
Moyers' series was a little bit later. But
Came up.
Campbell was a big influence for many of us. From that point on, how long did you stay with the Gnosticism?
Probably about a year, maybe two at most.
And then you found Sri Chinmoy because you came to the Sri Chinmoy Center in 1970, right?
1970. So let's say 68, 69, I met Francois, blah, 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 did the whole Gnosticism thing. Then in 1970, I met Sri Chinmoy and joined up with him
Well, you
for
know,
10, for 10 years.
the a year at that time seemed like a long time,
Yeah.
and because it was such a big part of your life that year that it seemed like forever. So, how did you get to meet Sri Chinmoy? What brought you into the center?
Well, I had a falling out with Francois, so I left that group. And one day I was wandering around New York City and I went into East West Bookstore on East 53rd Street. Or was it West 50? I don't know. Quest
West,
Bookshop.
yeah, right.
Quest is run by the Theosophical Society. So I'm perusing the books, and I used to always, I my entire life is spent buying books. I've read maybe 5% of them, but I love buying them. So I used to go to Samuel Weiser's down. I used to go to Samuel Weiser's down in the West Village and buy all these occult. Oh, that's it, when I was doing Gnosticism. There's a lot of Gnostic books down there. I would go there, and I would just comb bookstores. So I'm over in the Sri Aurobindo section because for whatever reason, I don't remember. I think I wanted to explore Sri Aurobindo. I don't know why. I'm looking at the Sri Aurobindo, and this woman comes up to me. She's dressed in a sari, and she says, "Oh, are you interested in Sri Aurobindo?" And I say, "Yeah, well, yeah, I'm checking them out." She says, "My guru was in the Sri Aurobindo art round for 20 years. Would you like to meet my guru?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" Then she invited me to go to a UN meditation. No, or maybe she invited me to go up to the Connecticut Center because they were new people would go up to the Connecticut Center on Monday nights to see Sri Chinmoy and he was doing his thing up there with his disciples up there. I said, sure, I'll go. And then she gave me her number, whatever, blah, 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 arranged to go up to the Norwalk, Connecticut to see Sri Chinmoy. So that's how I ran into Sri Chinmoy through this woman and the Sri Aurobindo section of the East West bookstore. Or Quest, whatever it was, one of the bookstores.
So let's go through your timeline at the Sri Chinmoy Center, starting with where you went to the Connecticut Center for Meditation, and what happened immediately after that. Walk us through how you ended up in Queens.
I went to the Connecticut Center a few times. I wasn't that impressed with the guru too much at all, and I wasn't getting anything from the meditations. But after two or three times, he said, "Listen, you can't keep just coming up here and visiting. You got to shit or get off the pot here. You have to either become a disciple or, you got to leave." So I said, well, I got nothing else. I got nothing else better to do. I'll become a disciple. So I became a disciple. But again, I didn't have any mystical experience or any big experience with the guru. It was like, all right, I might as well. So then I became a disciple. And at this point, I was now living in New York City, in Manhattan. Um, and so I would go out to Queens, so I went to Connecticut anyway, because people would always go up to Connecticut, even though they were from Manhattan and part of the Manhattan Center. So I became a member of the Queens Center. So I would go out to Queens from Manhattan all the time. So then I was kind of rooted in Queens. And then one day, Guru said, starting this bank of stores called Divine Enterprises along Parsons Boulevard, where they were centered. He was centered in Jamaica, Queens, and they were starting these stores. And he made an announcement saying, "Okay, well, who among you would like to open up one of these divine enterprises? We want to have all a bank of stores there together. And I said, because I always hated it. Every job I ever had in my life, I hated. So I was working on Wall Street at the time, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. So I said, "Hey, I'll do, raise my hand. Let me become one of those people." So then at that point, he said, "Okay, great. Move out to Queens, move out to Jamaica, open the store on Parsons Boulevard, and that's that." So that's how I got out. That's how I got out there.
Well, you mentioned something interesting that I want to touch on. You said you had nothing else to do, nothing else you were interested in, so why not join this group? Since you were such a strong central part of the divine enterprise situation, and you had an ice cream cafe, and you had all these people coming in, and knew so many disciples. Do you think there was a lot of them that became disciples because they had nothing else to do in their life, and they thought it was just something interesting to discover? Did anybody ever talk to you about that?
No, a lot of people came from Sarama yoga class up in Westchester. A lot of disciples came that way. I don't know what she was telling them. They were going for yoga, hatha yoga, all the, asanas and breathing shit and all like that. And they came from her. So she funneled a lot of people. Her name was Sarma, yoga teacher. She funneled a lot of people into the center. I don't know what she told them. I don't know what they were after. So no, I don't know. I would imagine people came for all kinds of reasons. I don't know.
Yeah, but from my point of view, coming in 1971, and sitting in the meditations, because I came to the Queen Center through John McLaughlin. I would sit there, in the back in those chairs at Divine Robe Supreme when they had the meditations there, and a lot of people seemed bored. And I didn't get the idea that, it was more than just a lecture, that they were really instilled in this whole deep spiritual search. Uh, it was just something new and they wanted to participate in it. That's why I asked you the question. And since you had communicated so much day to day with a lot of these disciples that came into your store, if they had ever discussed their own spiritual life with you. Um,
Yeah.
but they didn't. Okay. So now,
I think many of them did not have a spiritual life. I think they came to Sarma for purpose of physical health or whatever, but why do people get engaged in yoga? Because they want to have slimmer bodies, whatever. I didn't get that anybody I met prior to meeting some pretty heavyweights like Lex Hickson, let's say later on, that any of these people had any real spiritual life going on. I just didn't. If they did, it was not apparent. I think they were all newbies, and I think that the guru and his partner Alo Devi said on a number of times that basically what they were dealing with were quote unquote new souls, not like seasoned, longtime seekers. So I think a lot of the people there were just like this whole thing was brand new to them. That's my impression.
they were admirers more than they were deep spiritual seekers, or curiosity seekers rather than deep spiritual seekers. Would you say that that's more like what, I mean, the curiosity into something that is brand new on the scene? Because we had the Maharishi come in with the Beatles, we had the Korean Sun Young Moon with the Moonies, we had
The Perfect Master, Maharaji, The Perfect Master. We had Muktananda was big. Osho, not Osho, he was called Rajneesh at the time.
right,
He was
Rajneesh, yeah.
big. They had a lot of big disciples. I mean, a lot of big gurus there in the West, coming from from the East. So, it was in the air. This whole Eastern mystical thing was in the air.
Yes, and the psychedelic age was also part of that at the time. And perhaps people had some of these mystical experiences and felt that, uh, this whole meditation and Eastern philosophy was blooming in the psyche of everyone around. So, they thought this is an interesting path to follow. So let's talk about um, your time with the smile, how you developed that whole kind of following that you had.
So he said to me, the Supreme, which was what his name for God, the Supreme wanted me to open an ice cream parlor. So I said, well, if that's what the Supreme wants, I'm not going to say no. So I rented a store on Parsons Boulevard next to, there were a few stores there. Guru Stationery was down on one corner, and up the other corner, I think maybe Devashi's had his bookstore, and Kanan's Garland of Divinity's Love, the flower store, and then Pahar had Perfection in the Head World, the barbershop. So I got a store right.
Rebu had a music store on up there too, right next to
Rebu had
Devashi's.
Rebu, yes, Rebu and Jeannie or Rama had their little record store there. So everybody was like, this was when the center was new, and there was a lot of excitement going on and a lot of anticipation and a lot of like we're gonna really change the world, and so everybody was kind of pumped up, and so I moved right in there, and with the help of a lot of disciples who knew what the hell they were doing. I did not. So I had a lot of help from a lot of disciples like Chirantan and Abedon, a lot of people who knew what they were doing, and Premananda. They helped me build my store, which was an ice cream store. But one day, Alo Devi wandered in. Alo Devi, of course, we knew at the time to be the mother of the universe because she was Guru's consort or Shakti. She walked in, she says, why don't you serve some sandwiches in here? And it was wintertime and I wasn't making a lot of money on ice cream sales. So she said, why don't you bring in get some sandwiches, because we need a place to like have lunch, on this thing. Anand Brahma, the Indian restaurant, that, about a mile away.
John and Eve McLaughlin's
On
Indian
McLaughlin,
restaurant.
yeah, Mahalakshmi and Mahavishnu, they hadn't opened their restaurant yet. So I said, okay. So I started serving sandwiches. And then somebody said, why don't you have soup? And when you have salad? And then Premananda, who had a restaurant, Love and Serve, up in Greenwich, guided me and said, he brought down some equipment, like a hot, what do you call it? A hot, where you keep things warm, a hot, it's not a hot stove. Anyway, I put an abate on. A lot of people helped me, outfit the store to be more of a restaurant than an ice cream parlor. So they put in all this equipment, and so I cooked soups and made sandwiches and casseroles, and then somebody said, "Why don't you have juices?" Now this is the time when the health food thing was going crazy, and there were places in the city where you could get fresh squeezed, fresh juices. So I bought a big juice extractor. I started making carrot juices and all that. So just one thing led to another, till finally the ice cream, was just part of it, but mostly it was a restaurant.
Well, you did have an effect from the carrot juice that you made because you had orange all over your hands.
I drank so much carrot juice that my color changed orange. People say, you're orange, you're orange." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm drinking carrot juice all day because every time I made a carrot juice, there's always some left. So I would take it and I would drink it, and I turned orange."
And didn't you become big with veggie burgers? I mean, everybody was vegetarians there. And I remember you did serve veggie burgers for those who were craving that, protein, meat.
The Vashis, who ran the bookstore up the street, one day walked in and said, "Hey, I was just in the city at this place. I forget, Brownies or something, and very famous place in New York City, and they're serving veggie burgers. Why don't you serve some veggie burgers?" So I said, because everything I did, I got from somebody else. Everything that happened, I got from somebody else. This one said, "Why don't you do this?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Why don't you do it?" So I said, "All right, veggie burgers. I'll serve veg." So I started making veggie burgers.
Well, then let's give Alo Devi a little credit here. The mother of the universe had a wonderful idea when she walked in and basically kind of saved your store from going under because of wintertime and nobody wanting ice cream. So, well,
Yeah.
let's give her some credit because I mean, I knew her very well, and I thought she was a wonderful uh, being, mother of the universe. And so let's talk now about uh, you're high on making money, you're high on spirituality. You mentioned to me at a time that meditation really wasn't your thing. Can you talk about your relationship with meditation and your relationship that kept you at the center because you weren't really a big meditator?
Meditation has never been my thing, and I never was good at it, even though I have had not only the guru but other spiritual teachers. After I left the guru, I have had many spiritual teachers, and a lot of them emphasized meditation. But for whatever reason, I never liked meditation, and I never had a good relationship with it. And so, but I think, fortunately, in a sense, even though the guru spoke a lot about meditation and he meditated a lot, it was like, don't worry about meditation. You don't have to meditate. I'm doing the meditation for you, and all you have to do is do what I say, run around, do what I tell you to do, and you'll be all right. You don't have to worry about meditation. That's the message I got. And I think so I was kind of off the hook because I was doing what Guru wanted me to do, and he said, "I'm doing the meditation for you." He said he meditated on all his disciples every night, and so I figured I didn't have to worry about meditation. I never liked meditation, and I still don't today. So I don't, I personally I have my own opinion, but I think meditation is completely overrated. But some people like it, and some people get benefit. So I said, if you like it, if you get benefit from doing it, then do it. Do what makes sense to you. Do what resonates with you. Meditation never resonated with me.
So would you say that you stayed there because you uh, built a love for Sri Chinmoy, or was it more just a loyalty thing to him? How can you explain that?
I became totally enamored with the guru. I started out in Connecticut, not being impressed with him too much at all, and I joined because, well, what else do I have to do? It could be something good. I went from that to where I became a uh, a really devoted disciple and became totally wrapped up in the guru. And I love the guru more than I loved anybody ever. It was a divine love thing because, and his path was the path of bhakti or devotion or love and devotion. And so I got caught up in it. Once I got into Queens and started living the life, as opposed to I'm living my life in Manhattan and going to visit the Connecticut Center once a week. Now I immerse myself in that life. And in those days, there was a lot of, I would call it, divine energy going on in and around, especially in Queens where we were living. I mean, you could just walk, you would just live. It was like a bubble. It was like even though it was a working class neighborhood and we were living among ordinary people, it was like we were living and I think a lot of people would say, a lot of people who lived there at the time, I think would say the same thing, like we were living in a little blissful little bubble there. There was a lot going on. So I became totally enamored of it. And I wasn't there out of loyalty or anything. I was there because I totally love this guru. I would have done anything for the guru, and we often did do like almost anything. Whatever he said we do, we'd drop everything and run and go do it because that's the relationship we had with him. He was, yeah, he was our God without any ifs, ands, or buts.
So let's explain now that there was the inner circle of people that were closely knit to the guru. Um, uh, and primarily there were young girls or women. Uh, when I say young girls, either 18, 19 years old in their 20s or early 30s that would serve the guru by doing his laundry or anything else that he required them to do as selfless service. But there were also young men who were also part of that inner circle. And I believe, whether you want to admit it or not, you were part of that group. I mean, you were visiting the guru every day. You would ask for, Swadine, come over, bring me this food, bring me your soup, this, that, and the other thing. So you were spending quite a bit of quality time with Sri Chinmoy. And I'm curious to know your feelings because you're very sensitive to everything that's going on around you. What did you see in those moments of inner circle experience, either your relationship just alone with the guru or when you were there with some of the other girls or some of the, the guards as they were called, because Sri Chinmoy did build a defense system to protect him from any harm outside. So we had the guards, which we were part of, you and I. What's your feelings about the inner circle of the Sri Chinmoy group?
It was very intimate. When we were over there at the what we call the Blue House, he lived in a house that was blue, painted blue on a very ordinary street in Queens. When we were over there, again, it was like being in a bubble. It was very intimate and it was very warm and loving, and everybody was just like in complete. It felt like. Not that it was really, complete in harmony. We're all there to serve the guru. The guru was there to serve humanity. We're there to serve humanity through the guru. It was just very warm and intimate. It was very special.
Okay, so let's get honest here for a second. You and I and several other men, boys, and a few women belong to a kind of closed group of jokesters. And we, spent a lot of time not criticizing, but making fun of certain aspects of disciples' behavior in front of the guru. And it was our own kind of Saturday Night Live experience at the time. So I'm looking to find the Gary personality here and reconcile your love and devotion to Sri Chinmoy and your idiosyncrasy of the jokester who would make fun of the other disciples with the rest of us. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, one thing was early on, the guru, so there was something going on in the early years where people were getting depressed. And so in order to combat this, the guru did two things. Number one, he outlawed depression. You were not allowed to become it. Number one, it's against the law. The number two was he started these entertainment nights. And so he called on me and other people to put on shows, do stand-up comedy, tell stories. Whenever we went over to the house, if it was not a night where we had a special what they call function at PS 86, which was right across the street from the Bank of Stores on Parsons Boulevard, at his house he would say, "Oh, come on up and tell stories," but because he wanted to bring more joy into the center because people were after the initial honeymoon period. I think this happens a lot. There's a honeymoon period, and then the reality sets in, and people were starting to get depressed for one reason or another. especially apparently the girls, because they were jealous of each other. Well, I mean, I'm making generalizations, but a lot of that was going on. And so he wanted to combat that, and he wanted people to be happy. In fact, if you were caught being depressed, whoever was spying on you at the time would call the house and report you, and then you would get put on probation or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So depression was outlawed. And on a positive note, we had all these programs to make people happy. So I was one of the entertainers. And one of the things that was entertaining was, some of the disciples, quote unquote spiritual behavior. So it wasn't so much about the local disciples who were living in Queens, because we kind of knew what was going on, and it was like not as romantic and as ideal as some people from the outer burbs or the provinces or from Canada or Puerto Rico thought it was. We had, the day-to-day reality started to dawn on us. Yet the people from Europe, from Canada, from Puerto Rico, or from the different parts of the country, they come in and visit, and so they were bending over backwards to try to be spiritual. So these people were easy to make fun of because you saw right through it. They were like, everything was, you couldn't say anything unless you folded your hands up. So these people were like parodies, or it was easy to, like, make parodies or cartoon characters out of them, because it was so funny, because we knew things weren't all that spiritual, in Jamaica, Queens, but everybody from the provinces thought it was. So that was a good source of comedy, and that's what I'm using in speaking of the little aside here. We have the Divine Mother of the universe, and we have her nephew, Harry Rob Bruner, who we call the nephew of the universe. He's now he had a one-man show. He's helping me develop the same type of thing, like a one-man show type of thing, where I'm going to go through all the funny stuff that happened when you're a disciple. And so, one hand, you have the ideal picture of what's spiritual, getting dressed in a certain way and wearing beads, and then cut to the reality, what's really going on. You have doubt, you're jealous, you get angry, but we don't show that part, all this kind of stuff. So that was where the humor came from. A lot
So
of it.
you actually have a lot of material for your up and coming
I'm
comedy
doing,
gig.
yeah, I'm doing right now. I'm doing a writing workshop with my writing coach here down in Woodstock, New York. And part of this project, I'm kind of combining what I'm going to be doing with Harry with the one man show or the monologue, whatever, however it turns out to be, and this writing thing. And I'm writing a lot of stuff about all the funny things that happened when I was in the spiritual cult. And I said, well, one reason why now in retrospect, I'm looking back at one of the reasons why I joined the cult, because I kind of knew instinctively, like maybe my soul knew, that this would be a rich source, a great gold mine of comedic material, and it turned out to be. I just wrote a little piece for my workshop this morning, and I was laughing because it was so hilarious. The shit we had to do in order to be spiritual, and it turns out to be, complete, from my point of view, complete bullshit. But at the time, I took it and we took it, to be 100%, factual the way it was. So that contrast is a great source of humor, and certainly I got more comedic material from my 10 years in the Sri Moist Center than the 40 or 50 years after that, still going down different spiritual paths and checking different spiritual teachings and teachers out. So it's a great,
Well,
great, great wealth of material, wealth of comedic material came out of those 10 years.
okay, so let's move on now to what perhaps is a sensitive subject. Um, so the guru put together men and women in divine marriages. And I guess because the whole one of the beliefs of the guru was that celibacy was part of how you advanced on the spiritual path, creating purity in your life. However, there were disciples who had extreme lower vital tendencies, and I think he put these divine marriages together so they could release their sexual tendencies in a loving manner and not bring it with them when they came to the meditations or in their day-to-day travels. But you, young man, in a way, were told to go alone, as I recall, and you weren't really asked to marry anyone there. But
Thank
I'm
God.
sure.
I just want to say thank God. I thank God to this day that I dodged that bullet. I thought I was coming close at one time because at one time he told me when we were on a trip to Canada, taking the bus up to Canada, to go in the back of the bus and sit with this particular girl, disciple. And that's kind of, I said, uh-oh, he's setting me up for a divine marriage because that's what he used to do. He said, he would put people, go visit so and so and get to know them. And so that was the precursor to the divine marriage. So I went back there and I said, "Oh shit, I'm gonna be having to do a divine marriage." And I knew that I could never say no to whatever the guru said. But for whatever reason, it went no further than that. We arrived in Canada. I got off the bus, and that was it. So I say, thank God I dodged the divine marriage bullet. Okay. So, oh wait. Oh, so no. And then yes, and then later on he told me go alone. And so I said, don't worry, Guru. There's no way I want to get hooked up in any kind of marriage or anything. So that was good.
Yes, it was good, but you also had your own sexual proclivities that you were dealing with at the time. And I don't know if you want to talk about it. I guess there's, you
Well,
know,
sure, I want to talk about it. I love talking about my sexual proclivities. I
you know,
mean,
I think
why not?
disciples were sneaking out to New York City to get some,
Yeah, yeah, you know it.
nookie on the side, right?
I mean, come on. I thought everybody was being pure. Later on, I came to find out there was a lot of sex going on, a lot of sex going on with the disciples, not only in New York City, but down, you just have to go down on Jamaica Avenue, which was like less than a mile away from us, and there were hookers all over the place, and some of the disciples were visiting that area. So a lot of sex was going on, but of course, on the again, you have the surface, everybody's spiritual, everybody's pure. Meanwhile, what's really going on? You cut to the real story, and they're having sex left and right. So, I mean, you know,
You might
now,
have, they
it's like
might,
now to me it's like a joke. It
yeah,
was a
but they might have needed your experience with the syphilis organization because the disciples were going down to Jamaica Avenue to hang out with the hookers. I mean, that,
we know one disciple died of AIDS. So, there you go. So, yeah,
okay.
I mean,
I mean,
sex is something that will be with us for a long time. It's like Jesus saying to the disciples, when he was criticized for accepting this expensive oil from Mary or Martha, whatever it was, he says, listen, let her do her thing. The poor will always be among us. So like, sex will always be among us. You can fold your hands all you want and wear white clothes and pretend you're not having dirty thoughts or whatever. I mean, sex is going to be there for a long, long time.
yeah. So full disclosure, I had my own experience at the center, but we're talking about you right now. So a lot of the things that I'm asking you are experiences that I also went through. Um, but what was it now? So you had your store, you're sailing along, you're going on some of these Christmas trips that he used to do.
I love the Christmas trips because why? I got out of the store for 2 or 3 weeks. don't forget, I was working in that store initially 7 days a week. Then finally, I think he let me close the store. I think we closed the store once a week. I was working 14, 16 hours a day. So, day after day after day. So the Christmas trip to me was like, holy, this is a break. I'm going to relax and enjoy myself. So I love the Christmas trips. I went on the Christmas trips and just hung around. And yeah, well, I was on vacation, so the Christmas trips to me were always great.
Okay, so let's talk about something that is kind of interesting now because he did a lot of writing, and one of his many feats was to do as much writing, more writing than anybody else had done. How many books he could publish, how many poems he could write, and then he got into art. How many paintings he can paint. So I remember he at first started on the hunt for the Nobel Prize in literature, and he had us all sitting down in meditation. How did you feel about that? And then, of course, he decided that since he couldn't get it in literature, he was pushing for the Nobel Prize in peace. Who we know how that goes. So how did you feel about that?
I thought it was bullshit. And that was when I first started to become disillusioned. I said, this is bullshit. First of all, Nobel Prize in literature. What did he write? I mean, he didn't write anything along the literature lines. And his poetry, I thought was, like not too impressive, to say the least. So I saw that to me it was bullshit because he wanted to use that just as another way of becoming famous and well known. I don't think anybody in their right mind would think he was deserving of a Nobel Prize in literature of all things, and that's why when he ran up against a brick wall in that area, the handwriting was on the wall real fast. Saying, "What the fuck?" Then he switched over to wanting to, which made more sense to win the Nobel Peace Prize because of all the things he was doing for world peace. At the UN, he was meditating for world peace. He was having these world peace things, blah blah blah. That made more sense. But the literature thing, I said, yeah, I mean, come on, you have to be stupid to think that what he wrote it was worthy of any kind of a prize. So anyway, that was like the beginning where the cracks started occurring in my wall of devotion.
Okay, so let's talk about that because I want to move on to your next life. But what was it that really brought you to the breaking point of being a disciple to Sri Chinmoy Center?
The breaking point came in 1976 when Adi walked into my store and wanted to talk to me privately and leaned over. He says, "I'm coming with a message directly from Guru to you." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Alo Devi, the mother of the universe, has lost her realization." Hold on, has lost her realization. And Guru wants to know if you're going to stick with him because there's going to be a split. Some people are going to go with her, and I said, "Tell Guru I'm with him." And then but at the same time, I'm thinking, holy shit, lost her. How could somebody who is fully realized, the mother of the universe, totally enlightened, lose her realization? And why did she lose her realization? Because she was jealous. This was the story. She lost her realization because she was jealous of the girls who went to the house all the time, two in particular, who went into the house all the time, and they were very close to. One was his secretary, and one was his, whatever, very close disciples. And so she was jealous of this relationship that he had with these two girls, and so here she is. She lost her realization. So right away, as I'm saying to Adirata, "Oh, don't worry, I'm definitely with Guru." I'm saying this is complete bullshit, and I knew that the end of my discipleship was not very far off, although it took me 4 years from that point to extract myself because I was immersed lock, stock, and barrel 100% in that life in the center. Everything was, I had everything there. So, but I knew at that point, I said, this cannot be true. So meanwhile, up until then, a few years prior, little red flag here, red flag, this Nobel Prize for Literature, and other things, saying like, this isn't it, this isn't that. But it was not the breaking point. But when Anuradha came into my store that day and told me that Alo Devi had lost her realization because she was jealous of the two girls, I said, "That's it. I'm out of here." And even though it took me 4 years to get out of there, it was all over from that point.
So at that point, do you think you started to rebel as far as your devotion and what you were giving back to the guru? Were you
Yes.
doing things to almost try and get yourself out of the center?
Right. I belong to a club of boys. We used to go down to the Steak and Brew in Hollis on Hillside Avenue in Hollis, which is about 20 minutes away. Almost every night where we didn't have to be at the PS 86 for to attend a session, or sometimes we would go later, and we would drink martinis and have big steaks. So this is a two big no-nos. Drinking was a big no-no, and eating meat was a big no-no. And we would do that every night, martinis. So then I started to get drunk. Then I started to get drunk and have hangovers next morning because I had to be up at 5 o'clock to get to the store at 6 to start cooking the soups and the thing and get we open at 7. So this is when my 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 drinking started to affect my daily life, and this was the beginning of my decline into alcoholism and other things. But that came later. But in the meantime, yeah, I rebelled. I said, this is bullshit. This guy who claimed to be the final avatar or incarnation of the god Vishnu, the Kalki avatar. There were 10 of them, and he was the final one. And even Ala Devi was the one who broke the news to us one day. So now, but she's lost her realization, so she doesn't count. And this guy is saying he's the final avatar. I said, I got to get out of this joint because this is crazy shit, and it's just nonsensical.
So how did you jump ship?
I managed to jump ship because a good friend of mine who was a disciple at one time and a very close disciple and a very, very financial supporter of the guru came back to visit me one day and said, you got some, I don't know how, in our conversation, I said, I got to get out of here. She says, I can help you. My girlfriend, I live in Connecticut now, or I have a girlfriend in Connecticut. She has a house. She has a room. She said he must have, 'cause we had been talking, I guess, and so he had broached the subject. He said, you can live at her place. Because I didn't know where I was going to go. So she said, you could live at her place. So I said, okay, that's my out. Bingo. I had a place to go to. I I I let the guru know that I'm out of here. I got to go. And so having a place to go to made it easy.
But now you're no longer in the store. You have no more income to speak of, unless you're on unemployment. I don't know if you did that. But
You
how
can't
did
be
you
on
survive?
unemployment. You can't be on unemployment if you're working for a divine enterprise and you're not part of that system anymore. You know, I
So,
had I had so I had so my credit card debt was $3,300. When I left the guru, I went over to his house to say goodbye. He handed me $1,400 in cash. So I had $1,400 in cash. I had $3,300
that
debt. And I went off to Connecticut, but I could stay at this woman's house rent free. So I got by and I got a job up in Connecticut.
what job was that?
Driver service, drive your car service.
And I know from conversations with you that there were some famous people that you were driving around.
I drove for Martha Stewart. I drove for Paul Newman. Peter Straub. I later became Martha Stewart's main driver and kind of worked for her because she had to go to the city every day. So it was like a steady job there. So I got by financially.
Okay, so now I'm interested to ask you about your conversations with some of these people. Did it ever come up about you being a disciple a short time ago and your guru? And did that ever come up in conversations with these people?
No, never. I never brought it up, of course, and they didn't know anything to ask me. Or if they did, they were quickly, if they did, they quickly revealed that they were totally uninterested in any of this bullshit. The only person I had any kind of a spiritual conversation with was with Joanne Woodward because she had taken Est and I had taken Est. So there was some kind of link there. But other than that, these people don't want to, they think you're nuts becoming, with
Right,
all
but
this.
I understand that Paul Newman and perhaps Joanne Woodward together used to go to Love and Serve to Premananda's restaurant a couple of times. So I assumed maybe, he knew the whole Sri Chinmoy thing because he went to the restaurant.
He never indicated anything. No,
Okay, so
he never said anything about that.
all right, so now you're staying at your friend's girlfriend's house, uh, and what happened then? Because I know there was a point in your life where you really took a very deep, deep dive into kind of despair. Can you lead us on from here to what happened next?
Well, what happened next was two things. I left the center, and of course, I had spent 10 years in the center, and I was kind of out of touch with what was going on in the whole New Age movement. So I did two things. I plunged into explore, and by the way, my friend's girlfriend in Westport, Connecticut, was a New Age healer practitioner. She practiced polarity therapy. So I got into that a little bit with her. And then from there, I explored for the next several years everything I could get my hands on in terms of the New Age, what was going on, in the New Age movement in the 1980s. And so I explored all that. And at the same time, I I my drinking habit, which after a few years of clean and sober stuff, started drinking at the Steak and Brew in Hollis, Queens. My drinking habit got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then I got into cocaine in the 80s. Like who didn't? Hello, cocaine, 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 more cocaine, and then I got like, well, where that goes. And so I got kind of strung out on the, alcohol and drugs and shit. And so that was like 1980 something in the 80s. So then I was like really lost. So I was lost in my early life. Then I was found, let's say, with a little bit with the Gnosticism and Joseph Campbell, but really with the Sri Chinmoy Center, I was finally found, and now I'm out. Uh-oh, I'm lost again. So like a lost soul type. So that's like in the 1980s, sometime in the 1980s.
Weren't you living down south and you were in an insurance business or something?
So I got married in the 1980s and moved from Westport to Woodstock, New York, and then from there we moved down to Raleigh, to Durham, North Carolina, the whole Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina. So I was down there and drinking a lot down there in North Carolina for a few years until things went belly up for me and I lost my job. Oh, and all kinds of terrible shit happened down. Well, not all kinds, but like, I was that was a low point in my life. Yeah, North Carolina was a low point in my life.
Was your wife a co-conspirator in your drinking and drug dealings?
No, she was my wife was kind of a pothead, and she liked to smoke pot all the time. So, but she didn't do any drinking or anything. That
But
I
I mean, uh, she didn't create tension in your relationship because of your drinking and cocaine because she was getting high as well.
What bothered her, so it turned out that it turns out that I was diagnosed as being bipolar 2. So I was very depressed, but also I'd have these wild manic highs. So she said at one point, I can take you when you're depressed, but I cannot bear you when you're on a manic high. And I know what she means because I had a friend who was on a manic high and I went to visit him and I was like, oh, I can't take this guy. It's just too, the manic high is just too much. And then I avoided the guy. So I can understand that. So we had a difficult relationship based mainly on my drinking and my manic, when I got into manic high, it was just like I was just impossible.
From your Raleigh, North Carolina experience, where did you go from there? Because it seems that you hit such bottom, as I recall, that there was a shift at some point. What brought you back?
I hit bottom and then I moved to Ottawa because there was a woman I got into a relationship online who said, "Come live with me." So I was taking a whole load of antidepressants and stuff, and she said, I can help you get off your depression because you can't stay on your antidepressants all your life." So I moved up to Ottawa, Canada, to be with her, and then lived with her for a while and stopped taking medication. That was really great because the medication wasn't. I knew I had to stop taking the meds at some point, so I stopped medication. I'm trying to think. I stopped taking medication. Yeah, and I stopped drinking before this because I joined AA, and I remember I was going to AA meetings all the time. So I wasn't drinking, but I was taking a lot of antidepressant meds. So I moved to Canada. I got off the meds, and then I started to feel really good. Really good in Canada. This was in Canada.
Is that the time you met Roger Caverly?
Well, I had met Roger Cavalry when I was in the center because he was the disciple. He was a disciple for 25 years. So, in other words, I met him when he would come down to visit from Canada. I knew him then. And then when I moved, and then somehow, I don't remember how, we had stayed in touch in some way. When I moved to Canada to live with this woman and get off the meds, she was part of a Tibetan Buddhist Sangha up there. So I said to Roger, who was living in Lindsay, Connecticut, I don't know how far that way that was. I said, hey, because I know he was a spiritual seeker still. I said, hey, if you want to check out Tibetan Buddhism, come over here. We're having a big thing this weekend. The Lama's coming from Tibet or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we're having a big empowerment or something. So he came. And then he and I both joined up with the Tibetan Buddhist Lama and became part of his thing, Tibetan Buddhism. And then he went back to Lindsay. And then when I broke up with the woman in Ottawa, I went to Lindsay to live with Roger because he has a big Victorian house and he rents rooms. So I said, I'll come there and stay there. So we had that Tibetan Buddhist thing going on.
Is that when did he get into Ati Yoga at that point? And you
No,
also, no?
no, Ati Yoga came. All right, this was in 2010, let's say. Ati Yoga didn't arrive on the scene until about I'm guessing 5 years, 4 or 5 years ago for Roger.
What happened spiritually for you then? How did you make that next transition?
Well, once I get off the meds, and I wasn't drinking at the time. I wasn't drinking at the time. I got my spiritual aspiration back, and when I joined up with the Tibetan Buddhists, I became, I took refuge in the triple gems. Took the Bodhisattva vow. I had all these empowerments and stuff. So I was starting to rock and roll again spiritually, because now I had like a new spiritual life. And so my Tibetan Buddhist phase was very good because I got back on track with, aspiring. We have an expression in the center, aspire to the highest. So I was once again aspiring to the highest, the highest realization possible in a human body. So I was aspiring to achieve that. So I was back on track.
So let's go step by step, the different phases of the different modalities that you discovered at this point, bringing you into the present time.
Right. So then we're talking about 2010, for a year or two. Then I I wanted to stay in Canada permanently. I applied and was not accepted because of a whole lot of rigmarole, blah, 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 legal stuff. They said you can no longer, I was living in Canada for 2 years. They said you can no longer live in Canada. You have to leave Canada and you've got like 2 weeks or whatever. At this point, I met a woman online through, I've always been online. I've always been involved with different spiritual groups, all over the joint. Okay, so I met a woman online who told me she was going to South America to go check out the expat group Americans who lived in Montevideo because living down there was cheap, and she was like getting ready to retire, and she wanted to live someplace that she could afford, just being on Social Security, whatever. I said, I'll go with you. Bingo. So, because I had to leave Canada anyway, so I said, "That's great. I'll go. I'm in the same boat. I don't know where I'm going to go." And I only had like Social Security at the time, or whatever I had. Didn't have much. So we went down to South America together and visited Montevideo, and we toured around South America. Here and there, Chile and Argentina, Buenos Aires, and then I decided that living in South America was not for me. And so when we came back, I split up with that woman. And then that's when I moved in with Ann Carlton, a former disciple who I had met online with our ex-disciple group, because we had a whole ex-disciple group online saying, oh, what that guy did, blah, 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 all this stuff, ex-disciple group. I met her there, even though she had come to the center after I had left. So I moved in with her in Yonkers. And then I was there for a few years. And so then I didn't have the Tibetan Buddhist connection anymore because I left the Sangha in Canada, and I never kept up with it. I discovered another cult-like organization that I became very involved with. It's called Balance View, Candace O'Denver's Balance View. So I hooked up with, and it's very cult-like because Candace is like the equivalent of the guru in the Sri Chinmoy Center. What she says goes, and if you doubt, you're out. I mean, it's same cult-like patterns of things. So I hooked up with them for 2 years, and that takes us to 2014 and 15. Then I discover a guy, a teacher online, Fred Davis, who I took I bought his package of awakening. He had a 5-session package, to become awakened and enlightened. I took his package, was very impressed with him, and he told me about the Finder's Course. The Finder's Course, that he was going to be a teacher there, whatever. So I said, "Oh, the Finder's Course sounds great." I took the Finder's Course, and that's where I met most of the people I'm in touch with now. I go to meetings all the time. I'm still in touch with the graduates of the Finder's Course. We have an organization called Perfectly OK, POK organization, and we have all kinds of Zoom meetings and different things. And I'm always in touch with them. I took the Finder's course in 2015, and from there, um, I met the guy who totally changed my life, um, completely, 100%. A guy called Ramaji, and who has also like a Shakti or a consort. Her name is Ananda Devi. Anyway, I took their thing. And then from there, their thing is called the Rasa, uh, divine feminine transmissions. And then I was so changed by that that I learned to do that myself, and that's what I'm doing now currently. Because you heard that mentioned a few times with people we've interviewed. Said, "Oh, I had sessions with you, blah blah blah." So that's what I'm doing now. So that takes us where? It takes us right. Oh, no, then the Ati Yoga thing is, and then I got into non-dual Shaiva Tantra with Harish Christopher Wallace for a few years, and I'm very, very big, very big fan of non-dual Shaiva Tantra. And I discovered through different people, Joan Tollefson especially, and John Aston, Peter Brown's Yoga of Radiant Presence. So I got into that. I really, promote that, so to speak, because I think that's great. So the non-dual Shaiva Tantra. And then the latest thing is Roger's Ati Yoga. So Roger discovered Ati Yoga somehow or other, because he's like me. He's exploring everything. Anything that comes along, you're going to explore, you're going to check out. So he discovered Ati Yoga. And so he sent me a copy of his book, and he asked me to write a little. I wrote a little preface for it before he published it, and I was so impressed with this book, The Gospel of Garab Dorje, who was the founder, if you will, of Ati Yoga. I was so impressed with the book. I said, "Wow, Ati Yoga is right up there on a par with the non-dual Shaiva Tantra." Oh, I think I discovered Peter Brown after that, but I said, "This is." As far as a teaching goes, I would say Ati Yoga is the top. Even in my estimation, it's more powerful, better from my point of view than even the non-dual Shaiva Tantra, which I held up to be, uh, and the Tibetan Buddhism is up there, but not as high than the non-dual Shaiva Tantra. But the Ati Yoga now, this is what I'm doing currently. To me, this is the pinnacle teaching. It doesn't get any better than this. Now, maybe a year from now, something else will come down along, and I'll be saying this thing is that. Who knows? Because it's ever unfolding. It never stops. It keeps going. But right now, Ati Yoga, I would say, is the number one top of the list of all the teachings that I have come across in my journey.
So it seems like we've come
To the
from
present.
beginning to the present. You definitely did not walk alone, because you've been with many companions along the way. But now that we've gone over everything, do you have a philosophy that you can pass on
Yeah.
that is kind of centered within your own state of being?
I found a way that works for me, and I would say to anybody, don't stop until you find a way that works for you. It's not going to be, probably, in all probability, it's not going to be the way that works for me. In all probability, but find your own thing and stay in that groove, and don't get distracted from it. Once you find it, never, like, what's that thing? That song, like, once you have found her, never let her go. Once you find that thing that works for you, man, don't let that go, because that's the key to the whole thing.
What's the thing that's worked for you best?
Two things that worked for me best. Number one has been these series of transmissions that I got from Ramaji, these divine feminine energy or divine mother transmissions I got from Ramaji and his partner Ananda Devi. That was the thing that put me over the top. That was the thing that made all that made everything worth it, so to speak, and made sense out of all all the stuff I had done before for 50 years, seeking wise. And what does it for me now, from a practice point of view, it's the Ati Yoga practice. So that's that's it from like that. That's it for me. So unless something else comes down the pike, which has happened my entire life, something's coming down the pike. Maybe that will knock Ati Yoga off its top perch. We'll see. But right now, the Ati Yoga teachings that we were very involved with Roger and a few other people, and Crystal is involved because we did an interview with her. I mean, that's the top, that's the cream of the crop right there. But more importantly than that, more importantly have been these transmissions, because you could take the Ati Yoga or any teaching and you can study it, and it's all intellectual in your mind. But unless the transformation of consciousness takes place, the shift in consciousness, then all the philosophy in the world is not going to do you. It's going to do you nothing. So it's not philosophy; it's experiencing, reality, or your own insight into reality, not anybody else's. And so it's a combination of that shift that I had as a result of these transmissions that I received, and the Ati Yoga teachings, which also have their own practices and approach.
From what I've known about you for all these years, is you're basically an explorer, and you're open to whatever comes next, and you'll give it your full attention.
My philosophy is find your own thing, and don't stop until you do, because otherwise, as long as you're glomming onto somebody else's thing or sitting at somebody else's feet or thinking that person up there on the throne has something you don't have, then you're stuck, you're lost, and there's no hope for you. So you have to find your own thing.
Well, it seems like you found it. You've got a lot going on for you. Um, and I think before we end, let's tell the viewers exactly the different things that you do now.
What I do now is I hang out with a lot of people from the POK organization, people who have taken the Finders course and have gone on to form their own, spiritual. It's a non-hierarchical spiritual organization. It's called Perfectly Okay. I hang out with Roger's Ati Yoga group, and I pretty much that's kind of like, again, the POK thing and the Ati Yoga thing is kind of like my spiritual hangout. And I do my own practice, my own practice. And what I do, I offer people on a kind of selective basis. I offer them the same transmissions that I received from Ramaji and Ananda. I learned how to do the transmissions, and in fact, a friend of mine and I, we're training other people who have gone through the process, training other people to do the transmissions. And so I think that's my main thing. I would say my spiritual groups and my spiritual, activities with the Ati Yoga group and the Perfectly Okay group, and doing these transmissions on a very selective basis. That's what I do.
And you have your acting career, and you're getting set up for a comedy routine. So you've got some other things in the fire.
Oh, don't forget my radio shows.
And your radio show, yes.
I'm the Duke of Doo-Wop on WIOX Community Radio Catskills 91.3 FM. And also and I've had you on my Seekers and Finders radio show, where I interview people about their spiritual journey, just the way what you and I are doing on a podcast, Seekers and Finders podcast 2025. We're interviewing people. So, and I'm auditioning for another play. I just finished up with a play. I'm doing writing. I'm doing a writing workshop. I'm working with the nephew of the universe, Harry Rob Bruner, on my new one-man comedy thing called "My Guru Made Me Do It." That's going to be the title of my new one man. It's not big enough to be a one man show, but my one man, whatever shtick, stand up shtick or monologue shtick. So I've got a lot going on.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Wonderful.
I'm glad we had an opportunity to lay it all out for everybody. And I think that's it for today.
Yeah, and the main thing is don't take anybody's word for anything. I don't care who said it, Buddha, Jesus, or I don't care who, Osho or Rupert Spira or the Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra. Don't don't take anybody's word for it. Find out for yourself. Look for yourself, and stop putting these people on pedestals. Stop that shit. That's my advice.
That's your philosophy.
That's my philosophy. Don't buy anybody's bullshit. Get your own bullshit. I've got my own bullshit. I'm happy as hell.